Oh, hello and welcome to What Are We Talking About with Jamie Jakes. I am him, and we are here to make you guys some money. And that's exactly what we've been doing sitting next to Miles Francis, my good buddy. How you doing today, bud?
Good, man. Here to recuperate some losses over Christmas so we can afford those bills next month. So, we gotta have good picks today.
Yeah, so I guess you didn't have such a great week on last week's pod. We had a fabulous week, James and I.
I think I did okay with that. I just meant like having to pay for Christmas. I'm proud of my.
Okay.
I predicted. I said that the upset of the week was going to be the Oakland Raiders beating the Chiefs, and I'm feeling pretty good about that one.
That's a pretty good call. Yeah, I was about to say, I thought you had a pretty good week. I like to take notes, but I didn't get to you because the first two people I looked at had quite a fabulous week.
If you throw Christmas expenses in, I had lots of losses, but no, sports betting wise, pretty solid.
Yeah, Christmas, time of giving, but now let's take back from these bookies. Last week, like I was saying, I had a big week personally. On a bit of like a 3-week hot streak. I was 5-2 last week, and I hit my guaranteed to hit 3-game Christmas Day
Christmas teaser
parlay teaser.
Yeah.
I had the over under on the Ravens Niners. I had the Eagles -7.5, which just barely covered.
Yeah.
That was the one fingernail, and then I had, of course, the Raiders at +16. Who won outright against the Chiefs.
Yeah, they did. They covered that okay.
They sure did. They sure did. Yeah, imagine if I did that money line style. I'd be, on a mansion, sipping a yacht or whatever.
Doing this from sipping a yacht. Yeah, doing this podcast from your yacht.
Yeah. NFL Insider James, who cannot make it this week. I'm going to leave his picks in the comments section. He hasn't submitted them yet or in the description of the video. He was 5-0 last week, including a money line at +190 on the Baltimore Ravens, which was 190 when he recommended it. I think it moved a little bit towards the Ravens direction. But yeah, he had an absolutely massive week, so I know he'll be watching this, so shout out to him. In other news, both my dynasty fantasy football teams are in the championship.
Nice.
Yeah. A lot of them both the teams are kind of kept together by bubble gum and duct tape right now, but they're in the dance, and that's really all that takes. The real person I have to shout out is Justin Herbert, because he forced me to play Jared Goff and our podcast MVP Baker Mayfield, who won another one for us this week. Were you on that one too? The Buccaneers?
Yes, I'm on the Buccaneer bandwagon all season long at this point, dude. You're gonna have a hard time kicking me off of that thing.
Last week I tried to talk myself out of it too. Like, let me take my wins and just go away with a profit here on Baker Mayfield, who we'll talk more about later. But I was like, I can't talk myself out of it. It's just like I got to put my $2 on Baker Mayfield if he's getting points or if he's even money. So let's keep this streak going. Feels like I'm seeing the board really, really well. I don't have quite as many picks. I had 7 last week, which you might remember. I was really, really nervous about picking so many games. This week I only have 5, but we're just going to run right down the list here, starting with Thursday night. My parents will be in town. They'll fly in from Michigan for the Saturday night game, which we'll talk about in a second. And they're going to watch the Jets take on the Cleveland Browns. Last week, Joe Flacco became the second Brown in history to throw for 300-yard passing games in a row. He is now the number 2 odds-on favorite to win Comeback Player of the Year. I remember last week when he was asked if he deserves Comeback Player of the Year, he was like, "What am I coming back from? The couch?" Which I think is like just really funny and a great example of how hilarious he is. Amari Cooper last week broke the Cleveland Browns franchise record for a single game receiving yards of over 265. I think Zach Wilson's already pronounced out for this game for a concussion. If that matters, I mean, the Jets are entirely eliminated. I'm obviously not going to talk too much about the Jets in this breakdown. But the Browns are predicted, even though they haven't clinched the playoff position in the AFC. They are the 5 seed, and they are like a 99% chance, according to the NFL's website, to clinch that playoff berth. So even if they lose this week, they could still clinch it by the end of the week. Jets are in last place in yards per game offensively this season. Browns are first place defensively in yards per game this season, which is a fascinating matchup. The Browns are 7.5-point favorites. It is in Cleveland, and the over-under is very, very low at 36 points, which is why I'm actually going to take the over. And here's a couple of reasons why. You can't dink and dunk and matriculate the ball down the field against this Cleveland Browns defense. It's just too good, right? And here's how we're going to make money on it. We are going to take the Jets to have a big couple of pop plays. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson going to go for a 60-yard touchdown. Joe Flacco still might Joe Flacco. He's tried to be Joe Flacco for the past couple of games and has just kind of gotten lucky, kind of like awkwardly throwing balls out of bounds backwards or trying to throw picks or actually throwing a couple of picks in a couple of these games, which would be good for the Jets scoring opportunities. And I just believe in this Browns defense on top of it. I don't think that the Jets defense is going to slow them down too much. And all I need is a handful of big plays out of both of these teams, which have shown to be able to give up defensively and produce offensively. That's kind of like the only way the Jets have scored is like get a turnover and have one or two big plays lately. So I'm going to take the over 36 on this one. Miles, what are your thoughts on the Browns and the Jets game?
That over-under line is so low, it's almost tempting you that the defenses collectively might get this game, which almost seems more likely than the Jets scoring on offense at this point. This is, though, I'm hesitant to push too hard on this one. I feel confident this is going to be a Cleveland Browns game. I agree with you. I think Flacco is trying to at least show that he is not entirely wacko. Him and Amari Cooper have really linked up well. It seems like they've got a nice little rhythm going. And that Cleveland's defense has just been insane pretty consistently all year round. But one of my big misses last week was as bad as I think the Washington Commanders are. I'm still a little shocked that the Jets actually were able to put one over on them. Barely squeaking out a win, but pulling out a win nonetheless, which on this New York Jets team has only happened like less than a handful of times at this point.
Not much lately.
So I'm gonna lean the Cleveland Browns covering the 7.5-point spread, okay. But I'm not recommending any bets on this one.
Okay, so we got one lean there and one pick out of me. Moving on to the next game on our list, the Detroit Lions facing the Cowboys in Arlington, Texas. I will be
doing live correspondence from Jerry World over there.
Yep, you might see a couple of shorts coming out of me going down there. Who knows? Crazy things will happen. So I was actually at the Lions game at the Cowboys last season when the Lions got out to like a 1-5 start. And then they worked their way into a pretty good late of the season run. It was like 60-40 Cowboys to Lions fans, 40% Lions fans. And I expect this to be 50-50, or maybe we're going to see like a majority of Lions fans. I really do believe with what I'm reading, the tea leaves on social media, on Lions Twitter and stuff, like Lions fans are coming out for these games. And the reason being, they just clinched the first division in my lifetime. I'm 29 years old, and they just won their division for the first time in my life. Not the NFC North as it is right now, like because they had their last one was like the NFC Central or something like that. Like, I don't know, before I was born. Anyways, after the Lions win last week, then you're like, okay, we're thinking like if we got a shot at the 1 seed, the Lions, the Cowboys need to lose, the Niners need to lose, and they both do. So now actually the Lions are well within the hunt for the 1 seed and that coveted first round bye, getting their first playoff game at home in the divisional round of the playoffs, taking the remaining lowest seed, which could get you into the conference championship sometimes pretty easily with some of the guys that make it, some of the teams that make it to that range. Anyways, a lot to play for the Lions' sake. The Cowboys do tend to play better at home, and they are obviously highly motivated on their own 2-game losing streak, and they're still playing for the division championship and the 1 seed they're still in the hunt for as well. The Lions offense is just so hot right now with all the weapons. Goff throwing to Gibbs, Montgomery, Laporta, Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams. They're all just kind of like clicking on all cylinders all of a sudden, which is kind of what happened. We talked about last week in our week 16 preview, this being our week 17 preview, that kind of happened in Jared Goff's Super Bowl run year with the Rams, as he had one couple of games right before the playoffs that were just duds, through, I think, 0 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And then the last 2 games of the season through 6 interceptions, 0 touchdowns. And maybe that's just kind of the same pattern we're seeing here with their little bit of a mid-season lull that we just kind of saw them have. I think this line that we're seeing here, the gambling side of things, to be really underrating the Lions by about a half a point. I think that's where half of this point comes from. But I think the big thing is the Dallas home field advantage that they've enjoyed all season, I think is highly calculated into this number. And I don't think we're going to see a massive Cowboys home advantage just because of how many Lions fans are going to be there. So I make this game should probably be closer to like Cowboys -3.5, Cowboys -4, which forces me to bet the Lions. And that's going to be my favorite pick of the week. I'm going to take the Lions and Motor City Dan Campbell to at least keep it close and make me and my family have a good time here on this sort of Christmas weekend. Miles, what are your thoughts on the game?
I think this has big matchup potential to be game of the week. The biggest thing going against it is the fact that it's actually on the Saturday, isn't it? I was about to say it's the Thursday game, but it's actually a Saturday game. So no, this has huge potential matchup. For all the reasons you basically said. The Detroit Lions right now, one of the hottest teams in football. They are really starting to show how much they're cooking right now with a lot of weapons. But at the same time, you have the Dallas Cowboys, who are coming off of 2 road losses in a season where they have just been absolutely smacking their opponents around at home, which makes me think that this is going to be a close game. I'm kind of with you. That seems like a weird spread. My heart tells me that the Dallas Cowboys are probably going to win this game. But if I had to put money, another lean, I'm actually going to lean Detroit money line. And it's just because I feel like if they do pull it off, you might as well get paid for it.
Yeah, I agree. So hard lean for Miles, kind of with me on both of these ones so far, but no recommendations. I've already recommended 2. But I'm feeling really confident right now. At some point, I'm going to run out of luck, but I feel like I'm seeing the board pretty all right now. And moving on to the Arizona Cardinals taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. The Cardinals are 3-12, and Kyler has not looked great. Their only offense has been coming through Trey McBride, who I'm actually going to have to do a video on the channel. I think I'm probably going to record that and get that out tomorrow, because I've been seeing a lot of dynasty analysts ranking Trey McBride number 1 overall over, of course, Sam Laporta, rookie sensation out of Detroit by way of Iowa. So I'm going to do a video of that, so be sure to subscribe to that, to this channel, so you can see that video, because I think it'll be pretty interesting. The Bears, however, last week took out Trey McBride, holding him to only 5.2 yards per catch and only 31 yards total for the game. And for that reason, the Cardinals are only able to score 16 points last week against the Bears. Eagles handled the Giants. It was a little bit closer than it probably should have been, but they still covered the 6-point teaser, and that's all that matters. Last week, and now have the 3 seed in the NFC and are hanging on to first place in the division. The Eagles are 11-point favorites with an over-under of 48.5. I'm going to lean on the under 48.5, just because I think the Eagles are gonna be able to run the ball pretty efficiently in this game and just run a lot of clock off, especially late, trying to run the clock out of the round of the game. But for my fantasy football team who's in the finals, I would definitely appreciate a shootout. So that's my thoughts on the game. Miles, what are your thoughts?
I have both leans towards the Eagles being able to pull this off, even covering the 11 and sticking to the under, which I know might not, necessarily go with each other. But 48 points is a lot. for two teams to produce, when I do also predict a very run-heavy football script on this one, just because to all the points you mentioned, the Cardinals really don't have a lot of weapons. They've got James Conner, who's been very mediocre. Kyler Murray has not really been able to get it done in the air other than going to his tight end and scrambling like Kyler Murray does. And for those reasons, I think we're going to see a lot of that clock just running right off of this game.
I'm thinking so too, but hey, I wouldn't mind a whole lot of points scored from the Eagles in this game. Not at all. Moving on to the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. The Patriots have shown signs of life at this point of the season after taking out the red-hot Broncos, who were red-hot up until about 2 weeks ago. All of a sudden, now they're ice cold again. Zappe just had his career best game with a 117 passer rating and a 71 QBR, which is pretty damn good. But his best game of his career. The Bills are still fighting for a playoff spot. Currently, the 6th seed with an 87% chance of making the playoffs, according to the NFL's website. The Bills just beat the Chargers in a head coach firing game, which is why I recommended the Chargers last week. It's tough to beat teams when they just got their head coach fired. They know they got to show up and play really, really tough. So even though that game was closer than the line said it should have been, I still determined that to be a quality win for the Bills, actually. The Bills are 12-point favorites, so I think the gambling line is kind of not really adjusting to that at all. And the Buffalo Bills over-under is 40.5 points. I, if anything, would lean the over, just because maybe Bailey Zappe is starting to get comfortable and might have a little bit of juice in this game to push that over-under a little bit higher. Bills defense not entirely dominant this season. Neither is the Patriots defense, but I think this over-under is more just a sign of like the inconsistency in both offenses. And I think it's going to be potentially a high scoring game, but just a lean for me. Miles, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I can't really get involved in pushing a bet on this one because of what you said in the both teams just being inconsistent. I would say the Buffalo Bills have been inconsistently good. The New England Patriots have been inconsistently bad, but they have both been unpredictable, and unpredictable is the last thing you want when you're trying to make money off of this nonsense.
Yeah. If we really had guts based on what we just said, the unpredictability, we would probably just bet the Patriots at plus 147 money line just for something crazy to happen. But
yeah.
I don't.
Wait, you mean plus 4? Isn't it like plus 400 and something?
470.
Yeah, 470 there you go.
I thought I said whatever, but yeah, that's my only thought on that one. But yeah, just maybe a little bit more points than what that over under would represent. And by the way, that would help my fantasy football chances in the finals. Moving on to the Rams and the Giants. This game will be in New Jersey. Between the Rams and the Giants here. I've been keeping a close eye on the Rams lately since I recommended on this podcast a few weeks ago for them to actually make the playoffs. At the time, it was plus 190, and I thought that was a really, really good value. And it's looking good so far. But I only tell you that to say that nobody wants the Rams right now. Like, they are red hot. Stafford has enough weapons to goof around with. He doesn't need much, and he's got plenty. Nobody wants the Rams, especially the Giants. The Giants did have like a feisty kind of performance against the Eagles, despite Tommy DeVito only throwing for 55 yards in the whole football game. The gambling lines have it Giants at +6. I would have to lean to Rams to cover that big spread on the road. But that, again, is just a lean from me. Not on quite as many games on this slate as I was last week, but I think that's for good reason. Miles, what do you think on this one?
I'm real teetering on this one, just a flat out no-brainer with the Rams, but I don't think it's quite there. I do recommend the Rams -6. I think people have not given Stafford as much credit as has been due, as he's been making waves these last few weeks. It really feels like when he came back from that injury midseason, like he just had like a different mentality or a different, I don't know what it was, but he felt like he was operating on a different level. They've got some really great weapons on the Rams as well around him, both Puka Nacua and of course, Cooper Kupp still has it. And their running back has been doing well recently as well. So, I mean, really, they've been operating offensively pretty well. I think the last team I can recall, or the only team I can really recall beating them recently, was the Baltimore Ravens. And that's a contender for best team in the NFL right now. And they kept it close. So I think the Rams have a lot going on. And I think the Giants they've been way more consistent than either New England or Buffalo, but they've just been consistently bad the whole season. So Rams -6 all day.
Here we go. No brainer. Talked himself into it.
Talked himself into it.
Hell yeah. And you know what? I love it because guess what? The Rams and the Ravens was, like you said, that was December 10th. Before then, they actually, people will forget about this one, kicked the shit out of the Browns. I think that was right before they got Joe Flacco, but 36-19. And then, yeah, the next beat the Seahawks, and then they beat the Red Hot Packers when the Packers were on their run with Jordan Love playing extremely well. They got their asses beaten in November 5th. But yeah, they ran into some tough matchups early on in the season and never really looked horrible. And that's why I like them to make the playoffs. And I love that you just talked yourself into recommending the Rams there. Moving on to the Niners and the Commanders. The Niners are 13.5-point favorites at Washington. And that line, at first glance, kind of makes sense to me. But the Niners, however, did just lose Trent Williams, their all-star left tackle. And in my opinion, their whole offense runs through Trent. I remember when the Browns beat the Niners, it was like Browns have a no chance to win this game. And then in the second quarter, Trent and Debo go out and their offense just crumbles. They can't play. They don't have the protection they need. They can't run the ball like they need to against a good defense. Now, are the Commanders a good defense? No. They did just trade like their two best defensive players out. But I really, really think this Trent Williams injury is a massive, massive number. And I don't think we're seeing the line quite respond to it like maybe it should. On the other hand, the Commanders are pretty helpless. Like they suck. Don't get me wrong. They do have a lame duck head coach. Like everyone knows, he's gone at the end of the season. Some of them are still playing for pride. You saw them just lose to the Jets last week, where they got off to like a really, really bad start, and they kind of fought back to make the game kind of close at the end. Brian Robinson has been out with a hamstring injury for the past few games now. If he was back, I would say this offense is going to function a lot better and well enough to keep it close against these Niners if Trent Williams is out. If Trent Williams is in, I think this game is an absolute blowout. Commanders let the Niners put up like a 50 burger on them. But I think he's actually going to be out. So I'm going to have a contingency bet for this game. If Trent is DNP on Wednesday, DNP on Thursday, and if Brian Robinson either logs a full practice or a limited practice by Thursday and is trending towards playing this week, I am going to bet the Commanders at plus 13. I'd assume that number wouldn't move because Trent reporting not eligible and to play and Brian Robinson getting put in. So as a contingency bet, grab it quick at 13.5 for the Commanders to cover at home here. Miles, what are your thoughts?
This one's tough just because at first glance you see these two teams and you go, clearly the 49ers are just going to mop the deck with the Commanders here. The Commanders just somehow lost to the Jets, as we already previously talked about. Like that should put them into just automatic bet against contingency right there. But 13.5 is just a lot of points to cover, as we've talked about many times on this podcast. That's, any number of things just going slightly wrong for the 49ers. And it just puts it almost unmanageable. I'm going to stay away from this one just while I think the 49ers are one of the best teams we have in football right now, and the Washington Commanders are one of the worst, with as many injuries as both are having, with the 49ers playing away. It's just a little bit too much to overcome.
Yeah, and granted, the Niners just lost last week, right? So that's motivation for them. But in my opinion, I think the Washington Commanders feel when you say like, how do you bet on a team that just lost to the Jets, right? It's like, but that's also like
that's motivation.
Why wouldn't you bet on a team that just got their ass beat by the Jets, like on
to
Christmas
stay within
Day?
2 touchdowns? Like, that's all they have to do. They don't have to win. They just want to make it respectable to prove that they belong in the NFL.
Keep it close, and then maybe the Niners being a little bit humbled and being like kind of down emotionally, which is kind of what we saw the last time Trent was out this season, is when they went on their little skid where they lost a few games. Everyone's like, what the hell is going on? Then Debo and Trent come back from the same game. And they're like, oh, everything's fixed. Debo fixed it. And I was like, I think it's more Trent than anything. And it's kind of obvious when he went down in both games this season, the offense completely changed in a blink of an eye. So that's why I kind of like the Commanders, especially if Brian Robinson comes back. So keep a close eye on those practice reports as they come out, or if he's predicted to go ahead and smash it, in my opinion. Moving on to the Dolphins and the Ravens. Now, this is a game for the AFC 1 seed and the bye and the home game as it's all sitting right now. The Dolphins are coming off of a big win at home against the Dallas Cowboys, and the Ravens just murdered the 49ers like we were just talking about on Christmas night. In a high emotional game, there was a lot of talk, and that's going to kind of be my take on this game, is the emotions of either team. The talk before the game was like, hey, the Ravens are really being disrespected here. Why, are the Niners really, really that good? And then we all see what happens. The Ravens come in, take care of business. All of a sudden, Lamar Jackson is the heavy odds-on favorite to win his second MVP, which is, very, very impressive, and rightfully so. You just beat Brock Purdy, so why wouldn't you kind of inherit that MVP? And maybe we should have seen it coming a little bit earlier. Now it's kind of flipped though. The Ravens are now the 4-point favorite at home. I'm going to lean on the Dolphins at +4 here, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it, Miles, because you're a big Dolphins fan and McDaniel fan. Because I think the Ravens might just be a little bit tired emotionally, fatigued emotionally, coming off of their big win against the Niners. The only thing keeping me off of just betting the Dolphins outright is I think Harbaugh will get the guys buzzing for this game that also has massive importance, right? Like, it's for the 1 seed in the AFC, essentially. So I think both sides are going to be pretty highly motivated, but I'm just thinking maybe the Ravens are a little bit fatigued and tired. So that's why I'm going to lean towards the Dolphins and the points at Baltimore. Also, wouldn't be the first time we've seen the Ravens in the recent history with Harbaugh and this season where they just kind of come on home and have a little bit of a lull game when they probably should take care of business. And this is a tough matchup with the Dolphins. So that's where I'm at. Miles, where are you at on this one?
All right, I'm going to have a little crossfire with you on this one because for the exact reason you just said, I'm actually going with the Ravens.
Okay.
You had just mentioned that the Ravens tend to go home and have a little bit of a slump there. I actually see against a tough opponent specifically. The problem is Miami has been a spectacularly fun team to watch this season, but their kryptonite has been playing against top tier teams. They play against tough teams and they just cannot keep it up. It almost feels like they're a big fish in a medium pond, but as soon as you put them into like the full ocean, as soon as you let the walls down, they crumble a little bit. I would love to see me be wrong about that because I am a McDaniels fan. I would love to see them actually. Honestly, I just want to see all the press conferences with that man during Super Bowl weekend. That's going to be that would be worth the price of admission alone to see the Dolphins go to the Super Bowl. But I don't really feel like that's a big time possibility. And I think part of that is because the Dolphins tend to underperform when they're going against these top tier teams like the Ravens. So I do think the Ravens will cover 4 points.
Okay. Also, definitely, we've tried to speculate on the weather on Tuesday before. and it never goes well.
No.
If you've been paying attention, we
Being
never.
a weatherman is surprisingly more difficult than I would have given credit for, man.
Yeah, especially when you being a weatherman just consists of you just Googling it. But yeah, so definitely I would say maybe bet a half a unit now and then check the weather before the game, because if it's like, no wind, 45 degrees in Baltimore, nice sunny afternoon for this game, that'd point towards the Dolphins. And if it's cold and windy and shitty and slippery field conditions, that's Ravens all day. So to your credit, Miles, I think that's where I would lean in those situations as well. Moving on to the Panthers and the Jaguars, which is a game that's happening next week, and we have to cover it. And the Jags, are a good football team. They're in the playoff hunt. They did just come off an ass whooping to our podcast MVP, Baker Mayfield. I think all of us took the Bucs money line. And if we took like betting Baker Mayfield money line off of our books this season, we might all have like losing records on this podcast if we did it that way. Bryce Young may have had his breakout performance last week, though. He had 312 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, his best performance of his young career. So maybe we're going to see like a big Bryce Young bump up later on in this season. The Jags offense just simply hasn't been the same since Christian Kirk went down. They're on a 4-game losing streak to quarterbacks Jake Browning, Joe Flacco, MVP Lamar Jackson, our MVP Baker Mayfield in the past 4 games. So, I mean, some not so tough opponents, some really, really tough opponents, and all, relatively hot at the time that they faced them. The Jags are 7-point favorites at home. I'm going to lean the Panthers just based off maybe we're seeing like a Bryce Young figuring it out sort of thing late in the season here. And why wouldn't he? He was number 1 overall pick. But the Jags really, really do need to win to maintain their hold on first place in the AFC South. With the Colts and Texans having the same record as the Jags, all with 8 wins right now. So I am going to lay off it, but I'm gonna pretty firmly lean towards the Panthers. But the only thing keeping me off it is I think Jacksonville is going to be highly motivated and locked in for this one. Miles, what are your thoughts on the game?
Jacksonville is highly motivated. They definitely have a lot more at stake than Carolina does at this point. Carolina's playing to charge more than $1 per ticket is essentially all they're going for. They're not even at 50 cents at this point. But the other big thing is Jacksonville is beat up. I've talked a lot about Travis Etienne and the rib injury several weeks now. He was always high on my radar because he was one of the studs on my fantasy teams. But I'm also hearing a lot of talk that Trevor Lawrence is also very, very beat up. He's played through a few injuries that he's been roughed up a bit with that high ankle sprain that he had a few weeks ago. I'm hearing he's having hand injuries or some sort of throwing arm injury.
Right shoulder injury. So yeah, this is going to go back to more speculation on our side here on Tuesday night. Chance that Trevor Lawrence doesn't play. But even if he does play, like I said, like that offense has not looked the same since, like you said, Etienne's been out. But in my opinion, Christian Kirk, losing him as well, has been a massive blow to this offense. They're a true number 1 wide receiver, like we were kind of keeping a close eye on since our predictions episode, Miles.
Yeah.
So sorry. Did you?
I guess with all that, I have to say, if I had to bet, I'm really not gonna bet on this one. But I guess if I were within driving distance of the Panthers Stadium, I would bet at least 45 cents on the money line, because if you get that hit, you can take a friend to the game. Low risk opportunity, go see a live football game. So yeah, lean Carolina, but just don't bet this game.
That's fair enough. Moving on to a really, really important game. And Vegas lines are kind of predicting an important close game in this one as well. Like I said, Baker Mayfield, our podcast MVP. I try to talk myself out of betting on him again this past game, and I just couldn't do it. I was just like, all right, I was like, let me take all my money, take it home with me, and put it in the bank. And I'm just like, nope, I'm going to recommend the Buccaneers again because I just can't help myself. Baker Mayfield is just so red hot right now. And now they're facing the Saints in Tampa. So it's a home game here for the Buccaneers. The Saints just lost to the Rams on Thursday night, which seems like forever ago here on Christmas weekend, in a game that was not close. They make it a little bit interesting towards the end, but the Saints got absolutely blown out in that one. The Saints have one win over a team that is not currently mathematically eliminated from the playoffs at the moment. And that win came Halloween weekend against the bubble team Indianapolis Colts. Okay. So these Saints have not looked impressive whatsoever. You know who has looked impressive is Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is on a 7-2 run against the spread in his last 7 games. Give me Baker Mayfield to cover the 3 points. I have to, out of respect for how much money he has made me in this podcast so far this season. Miles, I feel like do I even ask you?
Nah, dude, it's the Baker Mayfield bandwagon, as we've talked about. I'm 100% with you. At this point, I feel like anybody who sets these at 3 points or less for Baker Mayfield is just asking to lose money because he's going to cover it.
Yeah, I mean the only argument you have is like, well, we've been taking him to cover close games. Now he's got to cover the full 3 points. But we've also seen Baker Mayfield kind of blow out a couple teams this season. I think the Saints are just bad.
I think the Saints are pretty bad. 3 points is a lot. If they can get up even a little bit, having Derek Carr trying to get you back in the game is not something you want to see.
Yeah, Olave coming alive a little bit, but also we talk a lot about Baker Mayfield, but with all due respect to this Buccaneers defense, which is like essentially the same defense that won him a Super Bowl with Tom Brady 2 years ago that we forgot about. It's not a bad roster. It's not as bad a roster as a lot of people are making it out to sound.
Mike Evans still doing work over there. He got a few passes from Brady, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, first ballot Hall of Famer Mike Evans just does it every single year. So why wouldn't you bet on this red hot Buccaneers team? And it will come to an end at some point, but
probably not against the Saints.
Probably not against the Saints. Moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders and the Indianapolis Colts, which is also a game that's happening next week. The Raiders look like an above average team ever since they lost their head coach and got an interim head coach. They're off of a massive win against the Chiefs, who, aren't what they used to be. But it's still a very, very impressive win every time you get one in Arrowhead against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, no matter what is going on with Travis Kelce and the rest of the targets there. The Colts have weapons offensively and defensively. And so do the Raiders, which is why I think this is going to be a really fun kind of close game to watch. The Colts are hanging on to the 7th seed in the AFC, but they could take control of the division with a win here and a Jags loss this week. The Raiders are still alive mathematically to make the playoffs. They have an 11% chance, according to the NFL website, with a record of 7-8 currently. After losing 3-0 against the Vikings a few weeks back, where, to be fair, to them, their defense did hold the Vikings to 3 points indoors. So that's something. They put up 63 points. The Raiders did against the Chargers, and then beat the Chiefs 20-14 at Arrowhead. So you could say the Raiders, they're red hot right now. They're buzzing. The Colts are 3-point favorites, and I think that is right about where it should be. It's the Loud House now. I don't know if you know that. McAfee will definitely be there. I would say, if I had to guess, be cheering the boys on, getting the crowd loud over there at the Loud House against the Vegas Raiders. Playoff implications on the line here, and I don't want to bet it because I think it's going to be a close one. I think maybe the Colts pull it off at the end with Gardner Minshew and the boys. Mr. Miles, what do you think?
I like a good comeback story, and that makes me want to bet the Raiders. They took out the Chiefs, which I told you last week. I felt like you guys were all saying that the Eagles were frauds. I think the Chiefs have been the biggest frauds of this season so far. But the Las Vegas Raiders were able to exploit that. I would like to see the Raiders continue this win streak and to pull off this game. But this is the other one. The first game we talked about earlier, Dallas and Detroit, is going to be probably game of the week for all the right reasons. This is like the dark horse candidate of game of the week, where it's like two teams that, like, realistically, neither of them are great, but they both have a lot to play for right now. They both have quarterbacks that didn't start the season, if I remember correctly. They both were candidates that came in halfway through.
Yep.
Or later, and that just makes for a real fun dynamic. Neither of them can grow facial hair. Both of them can throw touchdowns. Let's see what happens.
Well, yeah, Gardner Minshew can grow a mustache, though.
Isn't it fun? He kind of has like it looks like somebody's first mustache.
Yeah, it's not an impressive. I don't think he can grow like a full beard very well, but the mustache is pretty good. With a guy with a pretty mediocre mustache, I got to say the Gardner Minshew mustache is not terrible.
I couldn't grow facial hair if I tried, so this is all shit talking from a different perspective. But I don't know. They both seem like maybe they also shouldn't try.
Yeah. Anyways, that's gonna be a fun game. I can't wait to see it. Could be a wild one for sure with the Raiders and the Colts playing. But moving on to the Atlanta Falcons and the Bears. Who've been playing, pretty damn well for Bears standards. Some would call them red hot. Justin Fields has been playing great. He's going to be the starting quarterback for the Bears or a different team, in my opinion, at the start of next season at least. They are on a 3-1 run, the Bears are, with their only loss to being against Joe Flacco and the red hot Cleveland Browns just a few weeks ago, where they could have beat the Browns. They were one Mooney drop in the end zone, Hail Mary drop in the end zone from actually coming home with that one too. The Falcons just came off of a must win against the Colts, where they really, really took care of business after only scoring 7 points against the Panthers. Talk about inconsistency out of a football team. The Falcons have currently a 10% chance of making the playoffs, according to the website on the NFL. But I think they know they're kind of like the last game that we covered, the Raiders and the Colts, where they know their teams can technically make the playoffs and they might be able to. But once they get there, like, it's not like, if you just make it to the dance, like, no, you're getting blown out in the wild card round of the playoffs, no matter who you face. So I think they know that. So I don't think that is cause for any other extra motivation on the Falcons side. On the other side of things, the Bears are actually technically not mathematically eliminated, although they could win this week and they'll probably will be mathematically eliminated after this week, going into week 18. But I just think I think these Bears are pretty hot right now. And the only thing keeping me off of them, because I think motivation's on their side, the only thing keeping me off of them is how inconsistent these Falcons are. Because sometimes the Falcons will just come out and beat a pretty damn good football team like they did last week. And sometimes they'll score 7 points against the Panthers. So I'm currently a lean right now on the Bears. Miles, what are your thoughts on this one? Maybe you can talk me into it.
I'm going to go Chicago. I'm borderline no-brainer again. I haven't really pulled the trigger on that a lot this week. But the Atlanta Falcons have upset a couple of good football teams. They've not done it 2 weeks in a row this entire season. The Chicago Bears, I feel weird putting them in the category of good football team, but much like the Broncos, they're a team that if you only look at them the second half of the season and you just kind of ignore the first few weeks, they are a considerably better football team looking at those stats. And it's one of those, like, don't tell me what you've done for me, tell me what you've done for me lately. It's not what you've done for me, it's what you've done for me lately sort of thing. Chicago Bears are definitely one of those teams that have been doing a lot for people lately.
Yeah. And they've looked really, really good, and they're playing for their jobs. And I think the Falcons feel comfortable outside of Ritter, who I feel like has already lost his job, obviously. I feel like Arthur Smith isn't really fighting for his job right now. I think they're going to give him some time to figure things out. His dad's a billionaire, so why wouldn't they? And the Bears are just, I still think Eberflus and them are fighting for their jobs for the Bears or someone else next year. And they're playing really, really well. So I think they're counting their money and getting super motivated.
There's also a motivation. I'm sorry, but there's also a motivation. Like you mentioned that the Bears could win this week and still get mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. But there's something that feels better about that. If I'm on that team, you want that feeling of I did everything I possibly could.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work out for me versus like, well, we suck and we lost.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I think Justin Fields is just locked in right now. He's playing so well. And the rest of the Bears team is too, including Montez Sweat, who they traded for and then signed for. So we made fun of it. I mean, he's definitely helping them win some games and play themselves out of a really highly valuable draft pick. So, roster building wise, I don't know if it's the best idea, but to be fair to them, you are instilling a winning culture, which is, a big part of the battle as well. So I'm taking the Bears, by the way. I'm taking the Bears -3. I'm with you, Miles. Thank you for talking me into that one because I couldn't do it on my own. Moving on to the Titans and the Texans. Titans have been dead for a while, mathematically, of course. The Texans have a 37% chance of making the playoffs. They did, however, just get murdered by Joe Flacco and the Red Hot Cleveland Browns, like we've been saying. 2 weeks ago, the Texans beat the Titans by 3 points at Tennessee, where we might see CJ Stroud come back coming off of his concussion. However, the team is still without Tank Dell, who I can't stress enough is just like such a massive piece of that offense. And the offense doesn't have that deep threat to really open up a lot of things underneath and to hit the big balls, which they were hitting pretty regularly with Tank Dell. So that's a massive, massive loss, even if CJ Stroud does come back and looks like CJ Stroud before the concussion this season. Tannehill played last week for the Titans, was not great against the Seahawks. So for that reason, I'm going to have to lay off this one. I'm going to lean the Texans here, but just the injury concerns at quarterback with CJ Stroud may be or may not be coming back for this one. And Tank Dell still being out. I can't get myself to gamble on the Texans here. Miles, what are your thoughts on this one?
If CJ Stroud is back, even without Tank Dell, this becomes a no-brainer for me that the Houston Texans will pull this one off. I agree that Tank Dell does. It's a huge weapon. It's a huge loss for their offense. But the other side of that is, given the opportunity to step up, Singletary has just been an absolute beast, proving time and time again that they can get it done on the ground. And you do have CJ Stroud, who's proven to have a good mind on him and a good arm on him and good legs on him. The dude's a pretty much a total package when it comes to the quarterback position, even as a rookie, making really great decisions from behind the line with pressure on and everything. I think having that running back like Singletary, who's able to consistently be a threat that you have to be watching out for, really still allows somebody like CJ Stroud to be able to hit those targets downfield, even if they're not as talented as Tank Dell. So if CJ Stroud plays, this is a no-brainer, Houston Texans. If not, I'd still lean Texans. I'd just be a lot less confident.
Yeah, so keep your eye on the injury report. Just concussion protocol, it's extremely easily to predict. If he's like limited participation on Monday or Tuesday, he's playing. So if you see that, just bet it right away before the line moves, is what Miles.
Which is already Tuesday, so you should probably be checking that like right now.
Wednesday night will be the limited practice. Anyways, moving on to the 3:00 games. The Pittsburgh Steelers are going into Seattle to play the Seahawks. The Seahawks are 3.5 point favorites here at home. The Steelers are still on the bubble for the playoffs with a 17% chance of making it, according to the NFL's website. Steelers just had a classic Tomlin win against the red hot Bengals, and Jake Browning kind of putting an end to like the Cinderella story that might have been Jake Browning. He had a really, really tough game. Pickens last week, after being criticized for not blocking on the goal line last week, came out and had a massive catch and immediately started jawing towards the cameras, which is like just like classic like dirtbag, like, you know, dumbass Steelers move. But there are guys that like have like the old school Steeler mentality. Jaylen Warren had a massive block, like a pancake block on a linebacker on the goal line to spring in a touchdown. So there are reasons to kind of believe in the Steelers team to not all be like, you know, dirty, cheating, you know, dirtbags. But anyways, the Seahawks, who got off to a hot start this season, have kind of grown pretty stale into like a middling kind of football team. But they are on like a very quiet 2-game win streak, with win against the Eagles and last week against the Titans. The Seahawks are 3.5-point favorites at home, and that's exactly where I think this number should be. I totally agree with it, which means I am off of this game. Miles, where are you on this one?
Lean Seahawks, just because I do think that they have been showing signs of life again this last few seasons, and the losses that they have had been pretty tough. They lost against the Cowboys, they lost against the 49ers, and they beat the Eagles. So that's of those matchups, that's actually not a terrible turnout. The best thing going for the Steelers is Mike Tomlin, and unfortunately he can't suit up and go play. So lean the Seahawks, but 3.5 is probably pretty close to what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, every once in a while Tomlin will have just like a Tomlin game. It's almost like you can live bet it, but you can't. It's been, at least this season, been really difficult for me to predict like when the Tomlin game is coming. But you see it when it's on the field. You're like, oh, yep, this is the Tomlin one. There it is. They're going to win by 14 with no problem at all in a game they're favored to lose in. Moving on to the Bengals and the Chiefs. The Chiefs are kind of surprisingly, I thought, 7-point favorites at home against Jake Browning, despite Jake Browning's disappointing performance last week. These two teams, ironically, are kind of at their lowest point that they have been in years, just as like the outlook of this season. Despite that, the Chiefs are still have a 96% chance of making the playoffs. They haven't quite clinched yet, but they haven't been looking like the Chiefs that we've come to know, at least the December Chiefs that we're pretty used to at this point. The Bengals need a win to stay in the hunt for the playoffs. Jake Browning did just have his 2 worst games against the Steelers. The first time he came in to fill in for Joe Burrow, around halfway through the game, he had his worst game there. And then this following past week, he had his worst game, but his best game was his first start, and then second best game was his second start, and it's trended down from there. So it kind of makes sense why the Chiefs are 7-point favorites, despite them not looking super duper great so far. So I think this line on second thought is kind of spot on. So I'm laying off of this one. Miles, where are you on it?
I just mentioned earlier the Chiefs, I feel, are the biggest frauds in terms of best teams that we've talked about. They just really have fallen apart in a lot of important games and seemingly have only really pulled out the big wins when it's blatant, like, bad calls that go in their favor, it seems like.
Yeah.
The Bengals, again, you lose your starting quarterback. You're having to play from behind the 8 ball all season. Even when you had your starting quarterback, he was never at this point. At no point during this season do I think was Joe Burrow ever 100%. I think he was maybe really close a couple of games, but he was either recovering from an injury or getting injured in just about every game that he played in. And that just makes it really hard for any team to get any sort of foundation to build upon. I want to bet the Chiefs on this one, but because they've been so inconsistent, this is another game I just have to stay away from.
Yeah. How crazy, I was just thinking as you were talking about that with Jake Browning, how crazy the AFC North, they have basically one starting quarterback that's still alive who's actually going to win the MVP this year. And they're all still in the hunt for the playoffs. At this late in the season,
that's wild.
They're all in the hunt. one team's got Joe Flacco, one team's got Jake Browning, and one team started with Kenny Pickett, and maybe upgraded by benching him. So, like man, oh man, the AFC North, it's a crazy division, and just this season the way it played out. Imagine all those quarterbacks stay healthy, assuming like Deshaun plays good.
Right.
Anyways, moving on, almost done here. Moving on to the Chargers and the Broncos. The Broncos are 5-point favorites at home against the Chargers. The Chargers cover a big game against the Bills after firing their head coach. It's pretty well documented, which is interesting because Vegas hasn't really mathematically added it onto their numbers yet. It's coming soon. But whenever a head coach is fired, especially if that head coach was despised by the team, which is kind of the tea leaves you have to read when you're handicapping these situations, they play so much better the following week. It's just like everyone's laser focused. I think the bad juju is kind of like quickly brushed out of the room. And the guy that gets put in charge is usually the guy that just like the team likes the most, who has somewhat of a capability of being like a head coach in the NFL. The Broncos were on a hot streak after starting with a cold streak. And now they just like got an ice bucket dumped on them again, because they have been just ice cold ever since they got blown out by the Lions a couple of weeks ago. Like I said, I think the Chargers really hated their head coach. Seems like he's been responsible for a lot of the lack of production and lack of improvement in their skill, particularly in Quentin Johnston. Just watching that game last week, the Chargers and the Bills, I was really excited for Quentin Johnston coming out of TCU. His college quarterback just got waived from the Chargers, Max Duggan. The Kendre Miller has been on the Saints this season, has had a tough time ever since Alvin Kamara came off of his suspension to even like make the game day roster or like even get a couple of snaps. So I got to believe that Quentin Johnston is the reason that offense worked. Of course, TCU had a great defense too. But all that to say is I think Staley was really handicapping a lot of the progression for a lot of his athletes on the team. And I think his team saw that and really hated him. The last time they met, the Chargers got blown out at home, which I think also gives them a massive motivational advantage. The Broncos are ice cold right now. The Chargers are red hot. And I think this coach firing bump, it usually lasts like 1 to 3 weeks when it does happen. And I think the Chargers are going to come out and have another really good game against the Broncos. So I'm going to recommend Chargers plus 5.5 to at least cover this game. The money line is sitting at plus 190. So also recommend that as well. Half and half unit on the money line and half a unit on the Chargers, plus 5 on this one. Miles, where are you at on this one?
I'm going to push back you on this one. I think the Denver Broncos are going to get right this game. I think it goes into the same rules as like if you have a friend that gets broken up with, they're allowed to be depressed for no longer than the amount of time that the relationship lasts. The Detroit Lions smacked the shit out of the Broncos 2 weeks ago. They were allowed to be depressed about that for a week, which is how they ended up losing this last week. They're shaking off the cobwebs. All their friends are going to be nut tapping them, telling them to get over themselves. The Chargers are not. That's not it. Yeah, they're probably feeling a little extra motivated after they lost the toxicity in the locker room. But it's not enough to turn around a team that's just doesn't even have their quarterback anymore. I think the Denver Broncos are going to run all over the Chargers this week.
Yeah, Easton Stick has an overall 94.5 passer rating, which is, pretty damn good. He's playing well. The Chargers defense has pieces. Like last time I checked, Bosa is still over there, along with a lot of other, really good weapons on the defensive side of things. I know they're banged up offensively, but I can't wait to see our first 1v1 crossfire, because I feel like we're usually pretty simpatico and we do bet things. And when we disagree, everyone's like on one of our sides, and one of us is out on an island. So this will be a fun one for sure. to check out. I would love to hear what James's thoughts on this game is with the Chargers. Moving on to our last game of the slate. It's a 7:30 game. The Packers and the Vikings are playing. The Vikings are 1.5-point favorites in this one. Jordan Love is coming off of like his sophomore slump. So I feel like this season we're going to see like all 4 of Jordan Love's first seasons. Like we're going to see the rookie breakout, which we already saw. And then we're going to see the sophomore slump, which is kind of like what he's working his way through right now, but he's kind of trending up in the right direction game by game. The Vikings' last win that wasn't a 3-0 win was to the Saints in November 12th. So the Vikings are on quite a slide currently. Whoever wins this game will still have a shot to make the playoffs. Nick Mullins is 1-2 as a starter for the team, with his only win coming against the Raiders, where his team scored 3 points. The Packers cannot stop the run. Okay, so this is where I think where the matchup really sits in well. The Packers cannot stop the run, giving up the 3rd most rushing yards per game and the 5th most rushing yards per attempt this season. But the Vikings can't really run on offense either this season. So that's why I am going to take the Packers money line here. Currently sitting at plus 105, has moved a little bit since I did my research a couple of hours ago. Aaron Jones is back. And when Aaron Jones is back, that changes the Packers offense because it kind of opens things up for their deep threats. Who knows if Christian Watson's going to be back or not? Frankly, I don't really care. Romeo Doubs is a good enough deep threat with a couple of really, really good guys underneath, including a couple of rookies at tight end and wide receiver, Musgrave and Reed over there. My only concern about the Vikings is, of course, Justin Jefferson, who was kept in check last week against the Lions. But I'm just kind of feeling like he might have a big game coming back off of his long IR stint this season. But I'm just going to go ahead and stick with the Packers money line, getting the win on the road in a tough barn in Minnesota when they're still technically alive. But I'm going to take the Packers here. Big bounce back game. Jordan Love for him this season. Miles, what do you think?
Have you ever seen that schoolyard game where they just like grease up a football and then whoever ends up with it gets it? That's the winner of the game, essentially. I would rather see these two teams just do that. Like they just put one ball out in the middle of the field. When one player finally has possession of it, we have a winner of the game. This is going to be ugly, ugly football. I don't really like there's not like a lot of positives to be had on either of these teams, which is a real disappointment. The only thing I'll say on this one is this one does feel like our friend James would say a coin flip. And one of the things that I've learned from James is when you have a coin flip, you go where you have the positive money. So I like the Green Bay Packers money line just because, sure, why might be heads just as likely as it might be tails.
It's math, but you're going to take that 5 cents of added value, and that's math, baby. And that's what this podcast is all about.
Literally just a nickel. If you make a nickel a week, you'll be rich by the end of the season.
That is true. 5% profit ain't going to kill anybody. Miles, thank you for being on. As always, it's been What Are We Talking About with Jamie Jakes. This has been our Week 17 preview, where we recommended gambling lines on every single game for Week 17. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe. I will be putting out a Sam Laporta versus Trey McBride video where I'm just going to tell you guys what I think about their futures in the NFL and their value for fantasy football, particularly with dynasty leagues. So please subscribe to that. Thank you guys for joining us. Miles, what do you have to say?
You can follow me everywhere at Mr. Most Days Off. And if you happen to be in the Dallas area, come see Jamie and I both doing stand-up this New Year's Eve at Dallas Comedy Club.
Yep. I'm excited for it. The last time I did that, it was a great show. The 4 Jokers that you put on over there at Dallas Comedy Club. My parents will be in town. So I think I'm bringing my brother and my dad to that one. I think mom will be leaving to go take care of the literal chickens that we have, as well as like the 5 dogs that they actually have. That's not an exaggeration in Michigan. So yes, on that note, no stream on Thursday, live stream watch parties. I think what we're going to do is a Sunday family stream where I'm going to stream with my brother and my father.
Nice.
So that should be pretty fun. They haven't agreed to that yet. I haven't mentioned it to them yet. But I'm assuming they'll be in, at least off camera on mic. So thank you guys for watching. Subscribe for that because that might be hilarious. My brother is really, really funny, and so is my dad. So we might have a pretty freaking good time watching some football games that they don't care about, but they're going to have to. Anyways, thank you guys, and good night.